My name is Amelia Parker, I'm 29 years old, and for 3 years my mother-in-law treated me like I was nothing more than a gold-digging burden on her precious son. She had no idea that her husband's salary, and her entire lifestyle, was actually coming from my bank account. What happened when she finally found out didn't just destroy her smug superiority. It exposed a financial secret that left my husband scrambling to save his parents' marriage. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who had no clue about your real situation, this story is going to feel incredibly satisfying. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you enjoy watching entitled people get exactly what they deserve, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Let me take you back to that Friday evening in March when everything changed. I was in my home office in our Denver penthouse, reviewing quarterly reports for my consulting firm, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Helen, my mother-in-law. I already knew this conversation would test every ounce of patience I had left. Amelia, her voice cut through the phone with its usual condescending tone, I need to discuss something serious with you. I minimized the spreadsheet showing my company's $2.3 million quarterly revenue and gave her my full attention. After 3 years of marriage to her son Michael, I'd learned that Helen's serious discussions were usually character assassinations disguised as concerned conversations. I'm listening, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Michael worked so hard to support you both, and frankly, I'm concerned about your financial contribution to this marriage. She paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. When are you going to get a real job instead of this little hobby business of yours? My little hobby business. If only she knew that Parker Strategic Solutions employed 47 people across 3 states and had contracts with Fortune 500 companies. But Helen had never asked about my work beyond dismissive comments about my computer stuff. My business is doing well, I said carefully. Amelia, please. Michael told me he pays for everything, the mortgage, the cars, your shopping trips. Don't you think it's time you contributed something meaningful instead of playing entrepreneur? I looked around my home office, the office Helen had never been invited to see. Awards from the Denver Business Journal lined the walls. Photos from speaking engagements at tech conferences. A framed copy of the contract that had launched my company into the big leagues 3 years ago, worth $800,000 annually and renewable every year since. The irony was suffocating. Michael's $75,000 annual salary as a marketing coordinator barely covered our monthly expenses. What Helen didn't know, what none of Michael's family knew, was that I'd been quietly supplementing Michael's income for 2 years to maintain the lifestyle his parents expected him to have. I understand your concern, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building in my chest. Do you? Because I'm watching my son stress himself to exhaustion trying to maintain your expensive lifestyle. The penthouse, the luxury cars, those designer clothes you wear to family dinners. Michael's a good provider, but you're bleeding him dry. I nearly laughed. The penthouse was mine, purchased outright with consulting profits. The luxury cars were lease payments I handled through my business. Even the designer clothes she criticized were tax-deductible business expenses for client meetings and conferences. But Michael had asked me never to correct his family's assumptions about our finances. He was proud, sensitive about the income gap between us, and worried his family would treat him differently if they knew his wife was the primary breadwinner. I appreciate you looking out for Michael, I managed. Someone has to. You know, Amelia, when Michael first brought you home, I had such high hopes. You seemed ambitious, educated. But 3 years later, you're still playing at being a businesswoman while my son carries the real burden. The real burden. I pulled up my banking app and stared at the automatic transfer I'd set up 18 months ago. Every month, $3,000 moved from my business account to Michael's personal account. Money that covered his parents' expectations, his car payment, his contribution to family gifts and dinners. Helen continued her assault. I've been talking to Michael about your future. Maybe it's time to consider starting a family. At least then you'd have a legitimate reason to stay home instead of pretending this business nonsense is important. Business nonsense. The same business that had generated enough profit last year for me to quietly pay off Michael's student loans, a $47,000 debt his parents didn't even know I'd eliminated. I should go, I said, ending the call before I said something irreversible. But as I sat in my office, surrounded by evidence of my success, something inside me finally snapped. 3 years of biting my tongue. 3 years of watching Helen treat me like a parasite while I literally funded the lifestyle that allowed her son to meet her expectations. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my accountant. It was time for some financial transparency. The next morning, Michael left for his weekend trip to visit college friends in Boulder, completely unaware of what I was about to set in motion. Helen had invited me to lunch, another serious conversation about my lack of contribution to the marriage. We met at her favorite restaurant, an upscale bistro in Cherry Creek where she loved to be seen. Helen arrived wearing a designer dress that I knew cost more than Michael's monthly salary. The same Michael she claimed was struggling to support his gold-digging wife. "Amelia, I'm glad you could make time in your schedule," she said, settling into her chair with practiced elegance. I smiled politely, my purse containing printed bank statements that would change everything. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," Helen continued, cutting into her salmon. "And I've come to a decision. I'm going to help Michael see that your marriage needs some financial reality." "What kind of reality?" "The kind where wives contribute equally to household expenses instead of living off their husband's hard work." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between you and me, Michael's father and I are concerned. William makes good money at the firm, but even we budget carefully. Watching Michael struggle to maintain your lifestyle is heartbreaking." William. Michael's father, the man whose salary Helen believed supported their comfortable suburban life. The same William whose employment had been quietly subsidized by my company for the past 8 months. "Tell me more about William's work," I said casually. Helen beamed with pride. "He's a senior consultant at Morrison & Associates. Been there 12 years, worked his way up from nothing. That's what real work looks like, Amelia. Consistency, dedication, results." I nodded thoughtfully. What Helen didn't know was that Morrison & Associates had been struggling financially for 2 years. They'd been laying off employees, cutting benefits, reducing hours. William's position had been saved only because my consulting firm had signed a subcontracting agreement with Morrison, essentially creating work and income to keep veteran employees like William employed. The $8,000 monthly payments my company made to Morrison weren't charity. They were good business. But they were also the only reason William still had a job, and by extension, the only reason Helen could afford her designer dresses and expensive lunches. "William must be very talented," I said. "He is. Unlike some people, he doesn't need to pretend his work is more important than it actually is." The barb was clearly aimed at me. "Michael gets his work ethic from his father. It's genetic, I suppose. The ability to provide for family instead of being provided for." That was it. The final straw. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. "Helen, I think it's time we had that financial reality conversation you mentioned." She looked puzzled as I opened the folder and placed the first document on the table between us. "This is my business's quarterly tax filing," I said calmly. "Parker Strategic Solutions, LLC. As you can see, our revenue for Q1 this year was $847,000. Helen's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her eyes scanned the document, confusion replacing smugness. "This must be some kind of mistake," she said. I placed the second document on the table. "This is the contract renewal between my company and Morrison and Associates, the firm where William works. We've been subcontracting $8,000 monthly to Morrison for the past 8 months to help them weather their financial difficulties." The color began draining from Helen's face. "And this," I continued, placing a third document down, "is the automatic transfer I set up from my business account to Michael's personal account. $3,000 monthly for the past 18 months. The money that's been covering his car payments, family contributions, and the lifestyle maintenance you're so concerned about." Helen stared at the papers, her mouth slightly open. "Would you like to see the receipt for Michael's student loan payoff? The one I handled last December? Or perhaps the mortgage documents showing that I purchased our penthouse outright with business profits?" She couldn't speak. I leaned back in my chair, feeling 3 years of suppressed frustration finally finding its voice. "Helen, I want you to understand something very clearly. Michael isn't struggling to support my expensive lifestyle. My business has been supporting Michael's lifestyle, and indirectly, your husband's employment, for longer than you know." "This can't be real," she whispered. "It's absolutely real. That hobby business you've been mocking? It employs 47 people and generates more revenue in a quarter than William makes in 2 years. Those computer stuff projects you dismiss? They include cybersecurity consulting for 3 Fortune 500 companies and a government contract with the state of Colorado." Helen's hands were shaking as she picked up the Morrison and Associates contract. "William doesn't know about this." "No, he doesn't. I specifically requested that Morrison keep the arrangement confidential to protect employee morale. William has no idea that his position exists largely because of the work my company provides." The restaurant hummed with conversation around us, but our table had fallen into stunned silence. "Why?" Helen finally asked. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because Michael asked me not to. He was uncomfortable with the income disparity and worried about how your family would react. So I've spent 3 years letting you believe I was a financial burden while quietly ensuring your son could meet your expectations and your husband could keep his job." Helen set down her fork, her appetite clearly gone. "I don't understand. If you're so successful, why let us think?" "Because I love Michael, and maintaining your good opinion of him was important to him. Even if it meant sacrificing your opinion of me." She stared at the documents spread across our table. "These numbers, this is really your company? Every dollar. Built from a $15,000 investment 3 years ago into what you see now. No family money, no husband support, no trust fund. Just work, Helen. The kind of consistent, dedicated work you said I didn't understand." The irony of the situation was finally sinking in. Helen, who had spent 3 years lecturing me about financial responsibility, was looking at evidence that her own comfortable lifestyle was partially underwritten by the woman she'd been calling a gold digger. "Does Michael know about all of this?" "He knows about my business success. He doesn't know about the transfers to his account or the arrangement with Morrison. I handle those privately to protect his pride and your family's stability." Helen's phone rang. She glanced at it and paled further. "It's William." "Answer it," I said. "But Helen, when you do, remember that the financial reality you wanted to discuss works both ways. You might want to think carefully about how you discuss my contributions to this family going forward." She declined the call and looked at me with something I'd never seen before, uncertainty. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That depends entirely on you." What happened next wasn't just a conversation, It was a complete power shift that neither of us could have anticipated. And Helen's phone kept ringing. Helen stared at her buzzing phone, William's name flashing persistently on the screen. Finally, she answered. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice strained. "I'm at lunch with Amelia." I could hear William's voice through the phone, urgent and stressed. Helen's face went from pale to gray. "What do you mean, called into the office on Saturday? That's unusual." She looked at me with growing panic. "Okay, yes, I'll be home soon." She hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Michael, it's Mom. Call me immediately. It's about Amelia and, just call me." I remained calm, watching her world reorganize itself in real time. "Helen, what did William say?" "He's been called into Morrison for an emergency meeting on Saturday. They're discussing the future of several positions." Her voice cracked. "Positions that might be eliminated." The timing was purely coincidental, but the irony was perfect. Morrison was likely having their monthly budget review, the same review where they'd discuss the subcontracting arrangement that was keeping William employed. "I need to ask you something," Helen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is my husband's job safe?" I had a choice in that moment. I could have been cruel, could have held her anxiety over her head after 3 years of condescension. Instead, I chose honesty. William is a valued employee, and our partnership with Morrison helps ensure their stability. As long as our companies maintain a good relationship, positions like his should be secure. She caught the subtle implication immediately. Our company's relationship depends on professional factors, Helen. The quality of work, mutual respect, communication. I let that hang in the air. The same factors that matter in family relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Mom called freaking out about some business stuff. "What's going on?" I showed Helen the text. "Would you like to explain this to Michael, or should I?" "I need to understand something first," she said, gathering the documents. "These transfer payments to Michael." "Why? If you're so successful, why give him money secretly?" "Because Michael grew up believing that a man's worth is measured by his ability to provide. You and William raised him with those values. When we got married and my business took off, he struggled with the role reversal. The transfers let him feel like he was meeting expectations while I focused on growing the company." Helen absorbed this slowly. "So Michael thinks he's supporting you." "Michael knows I'm successful. But he doesn't know I've been supplementing his income to help him maintain the lifestyle you expect. He works hard at his job, Helen. The fact that it's not enough to cover luxury expenses isn't his fault, it's economic reality for most people his age." She was quiet for a long moment. "I owe you an apology. You owe us both an apology. And more importantly, you owe Michael the truth about what really matters to you, his happiness or his paycheck." Helen's phone rang again. This time it was Michael. "Answer it," I said. "And Helen? This conversation stays between us until you decide how you want to handle it. But the days of treating me like a financial burden are over." She answered the call. "Michael, honey, I'm here with Amelia. We're having a very illuminating conversation." I could hear Michael's voice, concerned and confused. Helen looked at me helplessly. "Actually, Michael," she said slowly, "I think Amelia should explain. I'm still processing some things myself." She handed me the phone. "Hey, babe," I said, keeping my voice light. "Your mom and I were just discussing finances. Nothing to worry about, but we should probably all sit down together when you get back from Boulder." "What kind of financial discussion?" Michael's voice carried that familiar edge of anxiety he got whenever money came up around his family. I looked at Helen, who was staring at the contract documents like they might disappear. "The kind where everyone gets on the same page," I said. "Your mom had some concerns about our household budget. I think I've helped address them." Helen nodded slowly, understanding the diplomacy in my words. "Is everything okay?" Michael asked. "Everything's fine," I assured him. "Actually, I think everything's going to be much better. Your mom and I have reached an understanding." After I hung up, Helen sat in silence for several minutes. "I need to ask you something," she finally said. "And I need you to be completely honest." "Go ahead." "Do you love my son?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course I do." "But you don't need him. Financially, I mean. You could leave tomorrow and be perfectly fine." I understood what she was really asking. "Helen, I didn't marry Michael for financial security. I married him because he's kind, funny, and makes me want to be better. The fact that I'm financially independent doesn't diminish what he brings to our relationship. But it changes things. It changes some things. It means we don't have financial stress. It means Michael can pursue work he enjoys rather than just high-paying jobs. It means we can help family when needed." I gestured to the Morrison contract. "Like ensuring your husband keeps his job during company restructuring." Helen picked up her wine glass with shaking hands. "I've been so wrong about you. You've been operating on incomplete information. Now you have complete information. What you do with it is up to you." She stared out the restaurant window for a long moment. "William's going to be shocked." "About the business arrangement?" "About everything. About you, about Michael, about how wrong we've been." She turned back to me. "Amelia, I need to make this right. With you, with Michael, with William. But I don't know how." "Start with the truth," I said simply. "Stop making assumptions about people and start asking questions. And maybe consider that a woman supporting her husband financially isn't any different from a man doing the same thing." Helen's phone buzzed with a text. She looked at it and her face crumpled. "William says the meeting was good news. They're expanding his department and he's being promoted to senior partner." She looked up at me. "This is because of your company's contract, isn't it?" "It's because William is good at his job and Morrison values him. Our partnership just helped create the opportunity. You saved his career. I created a mutually beneficial business relationship. William saved his own career by being competent and reliable." Helen stood up abruptly. "I need to go home. I need to talk to William before Michael gets back tomorrow." "What will you tell him?" "The truth. All of it." She gathered the documents. "May I keep these?" "Those are copies. Keep them as long as you need." As we walked to the parking garage, Helen stopped suddenly. "Amelia, why didn't you ever fight back? When I criticized you, judged you, treated you like you were beneath us?" I considered the question carefully. "Because fighting would have hurt Michael. And proving my worth to you wasn't as important as protecting his relationship with his family. But it must have been painful." "It was. But Michael's happiness was worth more to me than your approval." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve that kind of grace." "Maybe not. But Michael deserves a family that supports his marriage instead of undermining it." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "It's going to take time to fix this. Good relationships usually do." That evening, I sat in my home office preparing for the conversation that would change everything. Michael would be home tomorrow, and the secret I'd been keeping to protect his pride was about to become family knowledge. My phone rang. It was Helen. "Amelia, I told William everything. About your business, about the transfers to Michael, about Morrison. Everything." "How did he take it?" "He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, so Michael married someone extraordinary, and we've been treating her like she was ordinary. He wants to apologize to you personally." I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. "That's not necessary, but I'd appreciate the conversation." "There's something else. William wants to know if your business would consider a more formal partnership with Morrison. Not just subcontracting, but something bigger." I smiled. "I'd be open to discussing it." "And Amelia?" "Michael's father and I talked about Michael too. We realized we've been putting pressure on him to be something he doesn't need to be. We're proud of him for marrying someone who sees his worth beyond his paycheck. He's worth everything, Helen. Money was never the point. I know that now. We'll do better." After we hung up, I looked around my office one more time. Tomorrow, the careful balance I'd maintained between supporting Michael and protecting his pride would shift. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time for complete honesty. Maybe it was time for Michael to know that his worth to me had never been measured in dollars. Michael returned from Boulder on Sunday evening, walking into a house that felt different somehow. I was in the kitchen making dinner when he wrapped his arms around me from behind. "So," he said, kissing my neck, "Mom called me 3 times today. She and Dad want to have dinner with us this week. Something about properly welcoming you to the family." He paused. "What exactly happened at that lunch?" I turned in his arms, looking at this man I'd been protecting for 3 years. "Michael, we need to talk. About my business, about our finances, about some decisions I made without consulting you." His face grew serious. "What kind of decisions?" I led him to the living room and sat down beside him on the couch. "Remember when you told me you didn't want your family to know how successful my business had become? You said it would be embarrassing if they knew your wife out-earned you." "Yeah, and you agreed to keep things private." "I did agree. But Michael, I need you to understand what keeping things private has meant for the past 2 years." I pulled out my laptop and showed him the bank statements, the automatic transfers, the payment history. "I've been supplementing your income," I said quietly. $3,000 a month, transferred from my business account to yours. It's how you've been able to afford the car payments, family gifts, and lifestyle maintenance." Michael stared at the screen, his face cycling through confusion, realization, and something that looked like betrayal. "You've been giving me money? Without telling me?" "I've been supporting our household expenses so you could focus on work you enjoy instead of scrambling for higher-paying jobs you'd hate. But I thought I was handling things. I thought I was providing." "You are providing, Michael. You work hard, you contribute to our household, you're an amazing partner. The money was just supplemental. So you wouldn't have to stress about meeting expectations that were unrealistic for someone your age in your field." Michael stood up and paced to the window. "What expectations?" "Your parents' expectations. The lifestyle they assumed you could afford. The image of success they wanted you to maintain. So you've been lying to me for 2 years." The accusation stung, but I understood his reaction. "I've been protecting you from financial pressure that wasn't necessary. We can afford our lifestyle easily with my business income. There was no reason for you to work overtime or stress about money when I could handle it." "That's not the point, Amelia." His voice was tight with emotion. "The point is that you made a decision about our marriage, our finances, our partnership without including me." He was right, and I knew it. You're absolutely right. I should have discussed it with you. I thought I was being supportive, but I was actually being controlling. Michael sat back down, his head in his hands. Jesus, Amelia. Do you know how this feels? Finding out that everything I thought I was accomplishing was actually subsidized? Michael, look at me. I waited until he met my eyes. Your work matters. Your contributions to our relationship matter. Money is just one aspect of partnership, and honestly, it's not even the most important one. But it's the aspect everyone judges. Your parents judged. And they were wrong to do that. But Michael, I didn't fall in love with your bank account. I fell in love with your kindness, your humor, your intelligence, your integrity. Those qualities haven't changed. He was quiet for a long moment. What did you tell my parents? I told your mother the truth about my business. I showed her the financial arrangements. I explained that their concern about me being a financial burden was backwards. How did she react? She was shocked. Then ashamed. She and your father want to apologize and start over. Michael rubbed his temples. This is a lot to process. I know. And I'm sorry I handled it this way. I thought I was protecting your pride, but I realize now that I was actually undermining your agency in our own marriage. What happens now? I closed the laptop and moved closer to him on the couch. Now we figure out how we want to handle our finances going forward. Together. No more secret transfers, no more assumptions, no more protecting anyone from reality. I feel like I don't know what's real anymore. This is real, I said, taking his hand. I love you. My business is successful. Your parents have learned to respect both of us. And we have the chance to build a partnership based on complete honesty instead of careful protections. Michael squeezed my hand. I need some time to think about this. Take all the time you need. But Michael? Whether you make $30,000 or $300,000 a year, my feelings about you won't change. You're not a provider first and a person second. You're Michael first, and I love Michael. He pulled me into his arms then, and I felt the tension between us beginning to ease. I love you too, he said quietly. Even if you are apparently some kind of business mogul I never fully understood. I laughed against his chest. Some kind of business mogul who's been completely dependent on your emotional support, your partnership, and your belief in me. Success isn't a solo act, Michael. None of this would have happened without you. Promise me something, he said. Anything. No more financial secrets. If we're partners, we need to actually be partners. I promise. Complete transparency from now on. And Amelia? Thank you for caring enough about my family relationships to put up with my mother's judgment for 3 years. Your family is important to you, so they're important to me. But my wife is important to me too. And I should have protected you better. The following week, we had dinner with Michael's parents at their house. The atmosphere was completely different from any family gathering we'd ever had. William greeted me at the door with a firm handshake and direct eye contact. Amelia, I owe you an apology and a thank you. Helen filled me in on everything. Helen emerged from the kitchen looking nervous but determined. I hope you'll forgive the past few years. I was operating on assumptions instead of facts. We all were, I said diplomatically. During dinner, the conversation flowed differently. Instead of polite small talk about Michael's job and dismissive comments about my computer work, William asked detailed questions about my business, my clients, my growth plans. 47 employees, he mused. That's impressive for a company you started just 3 years ago. The demand for cybersecurity consulting has been growing rapidly, I explained. Especially after several high-profile data breaches. Helen set down her fork. I need to say something. Amelia, I spent 3 years believing you were taking advantage of Michael's generosity. I never asked about your work because I assumed it wasn't significant. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And I'm sorry for being so protective of Michael that I didn't give you the chance to know the real me. Michael reached over and squeezed my hand. We're all learning to communicate better. After dinner, William pulled me aside while Helen and Michael cleared the table. About the Morrison partnership, he said quietly. I want you to know that I had no idea your company was behind our recent stability. But I also want you to know that I earned that promotion. The work quality, the client relationships, the results, those were mine. I never doubted that, William. Good business partnerships work both ways. You provide value, we provide opportunity. That's how it should be. Helen said you could have let us struggle when Morrison was in trouble. Why didn't you? I considered the question. Because you're Michael's father, and Michael loves you. But also because Morrison is a good company with talented people. Saving good companies is just good business. William nodded slowly. I misjudged you completely. You know me better now. That's what matters. As Michael and I drove home that evening, he was quieter than usual. What are you thinking about? I asked. I'm thinking about how different tonight felt. How my parents actually saw you for the first time. How does that feel? Good. Really good. But also strange. Like I've been living in 2 separate worlds for 3 years, and they finally merged. Are you okay with the merge? Michael pulled into our garage and turned off the engine. Amelia, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever resent me? For making less money, for having insecurities about it, for asking you to hide your success? I turned to face him fully. Michael, do you resent me for being good at what I do? Of course not. Then why would I resent you for being human? For having feelings about a situation that challenges traditional expectations? Everyone has insecurities, Michael. Yours just happened to be about money. But it affected our relationship. It made things complicated. All relationships are complicated. The alternative to your money insecurities isn't perfection, it's different insecurities. Maybe I'd worry that you only loved me for my success. Maybe you'd worry that I was too independent to need you. Do you? Need me? I laughed. Michael, I've spent 3 years secretly arranging our finances to protect your feelings. If that's not need, I don't know what is. He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since our conversation began. I love you, he said. I love you too. And Michael? I'm excited to see what we build together now that we're being completely honest. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time we talked about expanding. The business, our family, our dreams. All of it. Our family? I grinned. Helen's not the only one who's been thinking about our future. But this time, let's plan it together. Michael kissed me then, and I tasted the promise of complete partnership, financial transparency, and a future built on truth instead of protection. 6 months later, Parker Strategic Solutions announced its partnership with Morrison & Associates, creating the largest independent consulting firm in Colorado. The announcement photo showed me shaking hands with William Parker, my father-in-law and new business partner. The caption read, "Sometimes the best partnerships begin with family." Helen framed that photo and put it on her mantle, right next to our wedding picture. Every time someone asks about it, She tells them about her brilliant daughter-in-law who taught her the difference between being provided for and being supported. And Michael? Michael quit his marketing job and joined our firm as Director of Client Relations. Turns out, his people skills and integrity made him naturally gifted at managing client relationships. We're still working on complete transparency. It's harder than it sounds after years of careful protections. But we're learning that honest partnerships, whether in marriage or business, create stronger foundations than protective ones. Sometimes the people who underestimate us the most are the ones whose lives we're quietly supporting. Helen learned that assumptions can be expensive, Michael learned that his worth wasn't measured in paychecks, and I learned that protecting someone's pride isn't the same as supporting their growth. Have you ever been in a situation where you were supporting someone who was criticizing you? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one and I love hearing how others navigate complicated family dynamics. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of people who believe respect should go both ways, regardless of who's paying the bills.